Welcome back, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you today to introduce you to my soul sister, Nicky Clinch. Now, you are in for a treat today. And as we go through our show today, I know you're going to see why I wanted to introduce you to Nicky. So, Nicky is a Hay House author. We're going to talk a little bit more about her book that's coming out. She's a maturation coach and facilitator, and she's going to explain to us what that means. It's very, very cool. She's also trained as a macrobiotic counselor, life and health coach, and she is a conscious breathwork facilitator in training. She is a mama, she's a healer, she's a leader, she's all kinds of juicy things. And I feel weird trying to put you into all these boxes because you and I both live beyond the box. But, anyways, Nicky, I'm so excited to have you here. So, welcome to the Great Awakening podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm just so happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me. As we were speaking before we pressed record and you were telling me about your audience here, I was thinking, gosh, what a gift to be able to speak to an audience that is already doing the work, that is already awake and really interested and diving into that conversation, because that's where we can really speak. That's where we can really talk the truth and not have to hold anything back. So this is such a gift for me to be able to come on here and speak here. So thank you.
Mhm. You're welcome. Well, I'm excited. And yes, I feel the same way. I feel like this is a year. The goal, I think, is always to be fully expressed, but I feel like the energetics in this year are calling us all to be fully expressed without apology, coming from a place of love, but knowing
Yep.
that when we're speaking our truth, it's going to land with a lot of people and it's going to potentially ruffle some feathers, even though that's not our intention, and that we are still safe and supported in being fully expressed. And I know this is actually a big part of the work that you're doing in helping people feel really comfortable in their skin, feeling comfortable being who they really came here to be. And
Mhm.
so I would love to hear about how you got to this place, like what happened from the time you decided to come into the womb. Hey, I'm going to go be a human again, and I'm going to come out of the birth canal, and I'm going to choose
Mm.
this life path.
Yeah.
What was that journey like?
Gosh, I actually have done work where I went back to those moments when I was in the womb, and I distinctly remember choosing my mother, and I when I was in her womb, that was the beginning. That was when my first trauma happened. So my mother was suffering from bipolar. She was suffering from depression. She actually had a trauma when she was pregnant with me, and I remember actually experiencing the depth of the terror that she was feeling when she was carrying me. And it was so intense that and I couldn't tell whether it was mine or whether it was hers. And I've done plant medicine work where I've been able to go back to these points and actually have to feel them and live them again so that I could release them. So when I came out into the world, I had this very distinct experience of, gosh, you know, who do I belong to? My mother was very not present. She was sort of in her pain. And I actually remember looking around going, well, who do I belong to? And for a very big part of the first half of my life, I had this, I felt like I didn't really quite belong here on human earth, that actually my biggest connections were in other realms. So I used to think that, the people around me, they were very strange. I couldn't understand why they were doing the things they were doing, and I would have these deeper connections with God and source and spirit and energy. And my mother would say that, I came out smiling, and I came out this sort of bright light. I would literally dance everywhere, and I would go up to homeless people and I would kiss them and hug them. And she said that I would be a 2-year old and she'd turn her back and I would have walked off, and I'd be holding the hand of a homeless person on the street, and connecting with them. And I love hearing these stories because I realized that for so long I lost my way, as we do, and I disconnected from my true self. But the path of coming home, I realize I've come home back to that person that wants to hold the hand of the homeless person and feels that deeper connection. That's really where I sit now. But for a long part of the first half of my life, I got lost. So in my confusion, not knowing where I fit, not knowing who I belong to, in my lostness, I started getting caught up in drugs and alcohol, eating disorders. I became bulimic young at 12. I became an alcoholic at 11. And I was on heavy drugs by the time I was 13. And I would say for 10 years, for a decade, through the whole of my teens, I was just lost in an absolute turmoil of addiction. But really, it was the turmoil of low self-worth and shame, just not knowing where I belonged. And I was very, very lucky. I hit rock bottom at 20, very young, and I was really unwell. I was a crack addict. I was completely emaciated. I was told I wasn't going to live till 30 if I carried on the way I was living. And I remember those final days when I just couldn't stop crying, because I just had no idea how to do this thing called life. And I also didn't know how to get away from being me, how I was living. And one morning I woke up and it was just the usual sort of internal suffering that was happening. And I got up and I was walking into my living room, and then something just hit me. And I fell to the floor and I just broke down. And it was like every single tear that had not been felt just started coming out. And I sobbed. And I sobbed on that floor. And something in me broke, but it was the beginning of a breaking open. And I remember hearing these words, and I write about it in the book. And I don't know whether they were mine or they were God's or source or light. And it just said, I want to live this life. I don't know how, but I want to live this life. And it was an absolute point of surrender. I just let everything go. And I finally just said, I don't know how, help. I don't know how to do this, help. Within a couple hours, I was in a doctor's office, just telling the truth about how I was living. Within a day, I was in treatment for my addiction. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning of my healing. And I was young, but I was ready, so ready. So, my path began with coming back to a connection to something bigger. It was one of the first things that someone said to me when I came into my recovery. Are you willing to do whatever it takes to become free? That was one of the first questions I got asked. And I just said yes. And I will still say yes. If someone asks me that today, I still say yes. I'll do whatever it takes. And that has a certain level of courage. But I believe that's in all of us. And I really have done whatever it took. At the beginning, it was just the basics of, not drinking, not doing drugs, not acting out in my addictions. But then it became deeper and deeper of really just going through all the layers of what had been keeping me away from my true self, feeling feelings again, the madness of the noise in my mind, going into healing my trauma. I've had a lot of trauma, sexual trauma, childhood trauma, abandonment, so much, and just having to keep diving into those spaces. And for me, the thing that has been the thread through the whole way has been my connection to something bigger. I just feel lucky that has always been there with me. in the dark nights of the soul, I've just been able to speak to source, in the moments when I want to give up and I don't know whether I have the courage again. I speak to source, and it has I've always broken through. And so when I look back on my life, those are the moments that changed me. The moments when I thought I wasn't strong enough, or the moments when I thought that it was too dark, or the moments that I thought that it was too on the edge. And then this breakthrough happens. And the breakthroughs are always bigger and more beautiful than I would ever imagine. And that's why I called my book Surrender, because those are the moments that change us and break us open. And so after 10 years of working on myself, I realized I was just so lucky to be alive and to be here, that I wanted to give back. So I went back to school, and at first I trained in Chinese medicine, and I trained as a macrobiotic counselor, which is really looking at how everything is connected: a diet, lifestyle, our emotions, stuck trauma, and how everything is energy, and everything is energy in motion. And how can I facilitate releasing stuckness, stagnation in a human being, to allow that energy to flow in every way? So that was the beginning of my training. And of course, that was going back to my roots, because I'm originally from Hong Kong. And, that was just the world I grew up in. And then I carried on, and I trained in ontological inquiry, really studying the mind and the nature of human behavior and human survival, the nature of how reality is generated through the mind and through memory. And so my work is very much an amalgamation of all my trainings together, and everything I've lived through, that helps people shift and heal from the taproot, but in a fully holistic and integrated way. So working with the mind and the emotions and trauma and energetic release, I just work on the whole being. And so that's kind of my story about how I got to where I am. And I just feel grateful, because everything I've lived through, everything I teach, I've lived through. And I don't think there's anything more valuable than lived experience. I've had so many amazing teachers, but my greatest teacher will always be life. And that stands today. And I like saying that a lot to people, because I think that stands for all of us. And it's very relevant to where we are now in the world. We can have so many amazing teachers and mentors, but if we're really willing to allow life to be our greatest teacher, then we will always, always be in school. I like to have a saying where I say, life can be a torture chamber, or it can be the greatest school you've ever been to. And that's how I like to live. I think we're in the most incredible education if we're willing to listen.
Oof. Wow, thank you for sharing that. That's really profound. And well, so many thoughts are going through my head. Like, I think about the common phrase of, we have to have the breakdown before we have the breakthrough. And I think that your story kind of, it illustrates that, but on a much deeper level. And even to be able to speak about it the way that you do, with actually reverence, right, and appreciation of your story and the choices that you made, to then allow you to have the breakthroughs that you did, so that you could share that information with other people, right? I just love that. So here we are, we discovered that maybe the world didn't work exactly the way we might have thought. We had some stuff happening in 2020 that made us aware that there's bigger stuff going on. There's a lot of complexities. There's a lot of paradox going on. We had a lot of racial stuff come up as well, and social justice issues. So there was a lot of layers last year. Definitely a very disruptive year. This year feels like a year of uncertainty after the disruption.
Mhm.
So the work that you do now, well, I guess let's backtrack because I know what you mean when you say maturation coach, but other people listening may not know what that is. So can we talk a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, I mean, maturation is where we pierce the invisibility of the assumptions that are generating our life. So, and I'm going to say that again because it's so important. Maturation is the work of piercing the invisibility of the assumptions that are generating our life. And I think that is exactly what has been happening in the last year. That we as a species are going through our maturation. That there are so many levels of um, blind spots. And I say the invisibility of our assumptions, that the assumptions that we have perceived as true, as real, fact, it's just the way it is, right? And every time one of those gets pierced, and we're kind of like, whoa, and our whole world shifts again. That's another level of maturation. And maturation is a process of growing. It's I use that word instead of transformation, just well, because transformation has become a kind of a overused word and it's kind of lost its meaning. And for me, maturation is not something that you do to get somewhere, like a bigger, better place. It's a process of growing, it's a process of evolution. We literally have to grow out. We have to outgrow who we think we were in order to grow into who we were born to be. So we outgrow something that we thought was fact or true, either about us or life. And in that process, we grow into something new or something that is our destiny. The butterfly, caterpillar grows into the butterfly. It doesn't just, fix it and then becomes it. It's a continuous process of aliveness that's taking place. It's happening in every aspect of nature, and we're part of nature. It's happening for us too. So my work is to be able to help someone pierce the invisibility of those assumptions, both inside themselves, in the perception of who they think they are, the stories that have defined them, that are imprinted in their being, that literally contaminates how we see the world. Um, and also that's happening, like I said, on a collective level. So that is the work of maturation.
Mm. So I can imagine then that you got even busier last year, like your company.
Yeah, I'm laughing because that is such an understatement. I've
Yeah.
never ever worked so much in my whole life, and it's wonderful. I'm so grateful. But I had the opposite experience to the economy breaking down and everybody losing jobs. For me, everything just kind of tripled, quadrupled. I was going from having 30 people coming to a webinar to having 700 people coming to a webinar, and it just happened like boof, like that. And I remember my coach saying to me, a mutual friend of ours, Susie, she's one of my business coaches, and she said to me at the beginning of the pandemic, and I was really freaking out. I had a lot of fear moving through me, and I was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And she said, Nikki, you were made for this. You were made for this. This is your time. Ask life what it needs from you right now and show up. And it was the best thing she could have said to me. And literally within 24 hours, that's the only question I kept asking. What do you need from me? What do you need from me? And I just kept showing up, and people just kept coming. And as well as all the destruction that is happening in the world, and there is a lot of pain going on. You know, when we pierce the illusions, that it's painful. Oof, so painful, individually and collectively. But the level of shifts that are happening and the possibility of the growth that is happening is greater than ever before. I've never seen people go as deep as they are going now. In all my 10 years of doing this work, the shifts that are taking place in the last year are like times 5, times 10 to ever before. So something remarkable is taking place.
I almost wonder if in part it's because we're already cracked open, and our options are to try and avoid the crack. Like the cracking open is already happening. So we can either stay in the rawness of it and constantly look at the shattered, glass all over the floor, so to speak, or we can just lean into it and lean through it. And so people, I think, are like, well, I'm already really uncomfortable. I might as well be uncomfortable a little bit longer and move through the stuff that this is bringing up and maybe have some semblance of integration on the other side of this.
Yeah, I mean, and those are the ones that are having the shifts. There's kind of two camps that are happening in humanity right now, and they're the ones who are fighting and resisting, and you can visibly see the chaos and the suffering that is taking place. And then they're the ones that are going, oh, okay, well, like you said, it's everything smashed, so why not lean in? Whatever we want to blame it on, the virus or whatever, what has happened, and it happened on a 3D level first, is that the very things that a majority of our species, a majority of the human race have used and identified with, that has defined their life. My routines, my job, the things I do, the things I have, those things got stripped away, and it happened quick, poof. And if ever that was going to give you an opportunity to face yourself and question, wow, well, without all of that, who am I? And if I'm not distracting myself with all these things, then I actually have to be with myself. And as uncomfortable as that can be, that is the invitation and the beginning of an enormous opportunity, an opportunity to really look inside and start doing that deeper work. So in essence, that has been the breakdown that has allowed so much breakthrough. And then, of course, there's just so many complex layers, as you were saying, of other things breaking down. I think we're still in that phase. I'm not sure we're done yet. I feel like we've got a little bit more to go of breaking down. Yeah, and I think it is going to be painful. There's going to be it's painful, but I just really trust. I'm curious and I trust the process.
That's a beautiful way to describe it. I would say that I'm there as well. Like I sometimes wonder, oh, is curiosity the energy I want to have? Should I be bracing for something, right? Like, how can I feel good about the curiosity? But I really just am, because I'm like you. I believe that even though this is crunchy and uncomfortable and it's all the things, that we were made for this time. We chose to be here on the planet at this time. We could have been born in 1920, and maybe we were, and maybe we've already reincarnated, but we're here now. There's a reason why we chose to be here now, because our souls would have already known that this was coming. And then all of our lived experience, like you were describing your history, and I feel the same about mine. I can see how my history prepared me for this moment. And then we have a choice, right? Am I going to just sit with my gifts and hoard them, or am I going to share them? And how do we do that? And I know we were going to chat about that. Like, how do we lead because many people, even the people that are claiming to be awake, and I'm not saying they're not awake, but there's an aspect of maturation that needs to happen around nobody's coming to save us. They're still thinking that there's people coming to save us, right? And so, how do we lead ourselves through this? What are some of the illusions potentially we need to shatter? And then, in leading ourselves through this, knowing that most people listening to this podcast are also leading communities, how do we lead our communities while we're leading ourselves?
Well, the sad thing is that we haven't been conditioned or taught to know our own power. So the first thing that needs to happen is to put yourself in spaces and places that are going to remind you of that all the time, that you are the one that has the power. And I'm going to be the one that kind of destroys Christmas here, but hope can be a dangerous thing, because hope can kind of keep us in that fairy tale story, like you said. Oh, if I just, it's all going to work out. Well, the real truth is, and this may sound morbid, and I've had to come to terms with this in myself, we really don't know if it will. It may not work out. We may not make it. There have been other species that have been extinct, and we're just another animal. So we may not, but this may also be the very breakthrough that allows us to evolve in a way that creates a completely new world. And we are sitting in that question right now. Now, the real truth is that it's up. We are the ones with the power to generate this. And like you said, we came back here for a reason. So I think for each individual person, now is the time to get really, really specific about who you want to be surrounding yourself by, what you want to be listening to, and what you want to be bringing into your space, and what do you want to be letting go of. You know, when you go into plant medicine ceremonies, the beginning phase, you know, the Shipibo tribe will always speak about it. The first phase is the cleaning and clearing. First, you have to clean and clear before you can really receive the big teachings. And so essentially, a lot of people are in the cleaning and clearing phase. And that's when you're just getting really honest with yourself, going, okay, so what really hasn't worked? What has been disempowering me? What has been leaving me in the victim place? Where am I staying in survival? And getting really, really honest. Who have I surrounded myself by that has kept me small, or kept me believing that I stay small? And just getting radically honest with ourselves about these questions, and being willing to clear the space, clearing what doesn't work for us and starting to bring in what does. And that can be small to big. You know, I'm seeing so many people leave their jobs. It's their 9-to-5 jobs, the ones they thought, you know, mommy and daddy would approve of me to have, but it's not who I am. So many people just going, well, you know, screw this. I don't want to live my life doing this. I'm out of here. And listening to your heart, to simple things like, I unfollowed like 500 people last year on Instagram, because I suddenly realized, you know, what am I doing absorbing anything into my mind and my energy that isn't exactly going to just feed me with complete inspiration and life? And so I got so specific. Who do I want in my space? Who do I want to be listening to? Who do I want to be learning from? And allowing ourselves to go through that cleaning and clearing phase, just like cleaning out your closets, but it's like cleaning out your life and cleaning out your energy. And then I think the real crux is starting to look at you. Who have you been being up till now? You know, and that's a big question, and it takes a lot of courage to ask that question. You know, what I went to the jungle 2 years ago. Gabo Mate was leading an alignment retreat in Peru, in the Amazon, and it was a special retreat for facilitators in healing and health. and there were only 21 of us that got to go out of hundreds of applications. And the first thing that we got told, we arrived in the jungle, we were sitting in circle, and the facilitator and Gabor said, you see, you can't be a little bit in alignment. You're either in alignment or you're not in alignment. And when he said that, it was like a kick in the stomach. Because I realized it was like, oh, because I really believed I was in alignment. But what was really the truth is I was in alignment. I was becoming in alignment in some areas, but I was really out of in alignment in others. You know, my marriage was going through real difficulties, and who I was being in my marriage did not match, you know, who I was being in my work. And I had to get radically honest with myself about who I was being in all areas of my life. How am I when I show up for my children versus how am I when I show up for the mobile phone customer service guy? And how do I show up with you? And being courageous enough to inquire and look at these things with compassion, and then making the changes that is required. You know, I actually, my husband, I write about it in the book. I actually came back from Peru and I ended my marriage after 9 years because I was lying to myself. It was so untrue for me. Well, what happened is that in the 6 months that we separated, we had such a massive breakthrough individually and together that we managed to rebirth the marriage, and we renewed our vows, and we've created a new one. But it required me coming home and getting honest and going, this is not truthful. I've been out of integrity here. Now these things, this is applicable to every single one of us right now. And it can be small to big. It can be like, am I really taking care of my body? Versus am I in a job that is aligned with my heart? You know, never has there been a time on this planet that it has been more important that each one of us comes out of hiding and we express the gifts that life gave us, the ones we were born to use. Now is the time. And the shift that we want to happen is only going to really be able to happen if enough of us work together. One person isn't enough. 1, 2, 3. No, it has to be mass collective shift. So this is the time now to go, right, you know, how have I been abandoning myself? And how can I heal that? Who do I need to speak to? Where do I need to go to start changing that behavior? How am I speaking to the people that I love? What do I need to forgive? What do I need to clear? So that was a long answer to your question. I can't even remember what the question was, but I trust that needed to be said. It's like one big ceremony. Like, you know, we're in a big ceremony. And every single one of you that are listening, please know that you are an integral part of this ceremony. And what each one of us does in the moments of our life and how we are being in it has an impact on the whole collective. And if we can change the little things, then we can start changing the big things.
Wow. I'm even having some ahas. Like after we finish this, I'm going to start journaling on, okay, where am I thinking I'm in alignment, but I'm actually just a little bit, like, obviously, as you mentioned, you're not even a little bit in alignment. You're either in alignment or you're not. It is an absolute. I think we can be on a journey towards alignment. And I don't know if we ever really reach full alignment, meaning that as you know, we keep growing. And so we have to keep calibrating to whatever that new, I don't know, point is, right, on the board. But I definitely want to look at that and see where do I need to tighten that up, and from a place of objectivity and like compassion and so on, but still look at that,
Yes.
because that is, and that must have been kind of jarring. It sounds like it might have been like, oof, if you're starting the retreat with that as the opening line, it's like, ooh, I'm being called to action here. I came all the way
Yep.
here, and woo, we're going deep apparently. Right? That must have been pretty wild.
Yes, it was wild. I knew that I was being called there for a reason. And now none of us knew that a pandemic was going to come. So now I know why. We all went out there to get ready. But just a little pointer about the out of alignment, the real question is, and it's hard to answer this yourself because we can't see behind our own blind spots, we're not actually doing anything wrong by being out of alignment. It's more about what is it that's been leading your life. So when I was in the jungle, I'd been doing some good things. I'd already got my book deal. I was, helped a lot of people. But when I really got asked that question, and I saw that I was kind of showing up in one way in one area of my life, but not everywhere, I realized, I got really honest with myself, and I realized that what actually, not all, but a big part of what was still leading my life was the one in me that wanted to survive my past. The little girl that wanted to get out of the trauma and make it in the world. And that story, that persona, that identity was the one that was driving my life, which is why it was kind of it was about myself more than being led by source. Now, I'm not saying that source wasn't that participating, but there was a lot of survival still happening in how I was living. And this is a really important part to where we are in the world. Each one of us has a story that we perceive as who we are. And it is literally generating how we show up in the world and how we experience the world. But as long as we're inside the story, we'll always stay in some form of survival. It's like a hamster wheel that just keep going round and round and round. For me, my whole brand, which by the way is now, I had to let it all go after Peru. I had a whole brand called the Warrior Woman brand. And when I was in the jungle, I realized the warrior woman was just a little girl trying to survive her trauma that thought she had to be the warrior woman in the world, and I realized, oh gosh, I don't want to be the warrior woman. I don't want everything to be something that has to fix something from my past. I don't want it to, what I'm trying to seek being the answer to something I'm getting away from. And that's the nature of survival when we're trying to get somewhere, to get away from something. And we're constantly in that search, and we're constantly in that striving. And as long as we're in that place, we're not really being here in the present. And so for me, when I had that kind of waking up moment, that was the beginning of me realize of a piercing of an invisibility for me, that the persona that I really thought was who I am was starting to dissolve. That actually, I don't need to be the warrior woman. I can just be me. I don't need to try and get anywhere. I can be here. And in the gift of that is that the more that it's like a snake shedding a skin. The more I shed that skin, the less striving I needed to do, the more I could be. Ironically, the more I can be, the more powerful my business has become. The less striving and surviving, the more life flows. And I think that's happening on a collective level. The real invitation here is, as a species, we've been being in survival for so long. Got to get there, get away from here, got to do this to get away from that. And I think the invitation now is actually to come out of that way of being and to really, really, really shift the way we're being human in the world.
Mm,
Yeah, I wonder if that makes sense.
absolutely. I love what you said too about we're in one big ceremony. That really hit home.
Yeah. And you know,
And
when you're
I
in
feel like it might give
ceremony,
us all peace, right? Like if we can all look at it that way, I feel like we can also, for the people that we feel aren't maybe as awake as we'd like them to be, or why is this person holding this perspective? Can't they see that this is really the truth? And all the things that we can potentially perceive if we recognize that we're all going through our own massive ceremony and it's going to come out of us the way it does and it's going to take the time that it takes, then
yep,
we can focus our energy back on ourselves, which is really where it should be anyways, meaning like we don't have control over that. We only have control over how we show up and whether we can
absolutely.
be proud of how we're, how we're conducting ourselves. So yeah, I
Yep.
love that.
I mean, if you're in ceremony, for those of you who have or are listening who've actually been in a plant medicine ceremony or any, well, I would suppose any ceremony, but a plant medicine ceremony in particular, you know, when you're sitting in ceremony and ayahuasca or plant or the plants you're working with start bringing in your teachings, you don't get up and start running around the room and asking people, what do you think? What do you think she's teaching me? What do you think she's teaching me? No, you go inward and you listen
Mm.
and you pay attention. And so I like to use that analogy because particularly with, you know, uncovering these untruths and truths of what's happening in relation to the pandemic or in the world, and you know what's been running our world and the kind of illusions that we've been living in that are breaking open. You know, what's going to be more powerful, running around going, oh my god, did you hear about this, and what do you think about this, and da 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 da, or going inward, listening. Okay, wow, what a big lesson. What can I learn? What do I need to hear? What do I need to shift? Who do I need to be right now? There's such a difference, you know, and you can even feel the difference in power. There's so little power in running around, you know, shaking, waking you up. No one wakes up that way. People wake up by who you're being. They're like, whoa, what just happened? They won't even know why, but something just shifted just by the way you're breathing. um, it's I don't really think there's anything more powerful than a really conscious, present human being. I think it's an extremely powerful thing to witness and to be around.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
So based on the energies that you're tuning into for this year, what what do we, when I say prepare for, I know what, I don't mean that from a place of control, but knowing sort of the pulse or the frequency that we're feeling into for this year, what might we anticipate and how might we respond to that from that higher perspective?
Wow. You know, my first answer to that question is I really don't know. I wish I knew, but I don't. I feel like I know less now than I did before. Like I really don't know, but I'm listening very deeply. In fact, I feel like I'm listening deeper than ever before. I have no idea how this is going to go. And I have so many questions. Like, you know, I had 3D questions. What am I going to do? What am I going to do if the vaccine comes to me? What am I going to do if I can't travel? What am I going to, you know, all these kind of questions that my mind, you know, wants to know the answers to. And then I just keep coming back to, well, I don't know, and just be in the I don't know. There's something extremely powerful and vulnerable that
Mm.
comes with allowing ourselves to not know. And by being there, we have an opportunity to listen deeper. not to the press and not to people on Instagram, but to life. Um, I have a sense that things are going to still be very, very, very challenging for a while. On a really mass collective level, I just feel like we're going through, like I said, there's just a huge maturation process where people's identifications to their stories, to who they think they are, is just going to be continually challenged, and maybe even smashed apart. And in that, there will be pain and grief and more breakthroughs and awakenings. I think individually, this is the time to make it a priority to stay in your power and to stay centered in every possible way. Because I have to trust that whenever, if something's going to come that's going to be extremely challenging, more than even what we've seen, then I need to be ready and I need to be awake when it comes. And so I don't think I've ever taken better care of my diet, of my energy field. I've really cleaned up my diet, not because of dieting, but because of my energy. I've been practicing this amazing new book called Grow a New Body by Alberto Bololdo, and he's a shaman, and a doctor, and it's just a profound way of eating that is regenerating your cells so that you're at your peak of aliveness, um, and clarity and stillness. I think if we make it a priority to take care of our well-being and our mental state and our emotional state, then I trust completely that when things get more challenging, which they may, we're going to be in our power to know what to do. And that's going to be really important, because there's a distinct difference between reacting and taking conscious action. And we need to be doing less reacting and a lot more conscious action. I think that's the only thing I know. The rest, I'm just listening. I'm trying not to get too caught up in the 3D stuff. I want to stay aware. I want to kind of keep my eye on the game, but I don't want to get lost in it, because it's really just another story, and stories are not going to get us out of this. We need to be standing in a bigger space than that.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
I love that. Totally. I'm of the same opinion. I do feel like it's reasonable to predict that some other big things are going to come that we couldn't have even seen coming. Mm-hmm. I think that's part of the game, is to do the bait and switch of, let's get you all focused over here so that we'll I think even the people that think they know what the distraction is still going to surprise us, whatever that distraction is that's going to come in. And you talked about the food, which is great. And I feel like I've really cleaned up too. My last vice was caffeine in general, I should say, right? And I weaned myself off that. And I didn't even feel addicted to it. It was just kind of something I did. I enjoyed the taste of it. My husband likes to drink coffee. We drink coffee in the morning. And but it started to taste different. And then I knew, well, if it's tasting different, it's not enjoyable, then there's no need for it. My body is obviously not wanting it because it doesn't taste good anymore. My body's, now when it was tasting not so great, then I realized it was a habit and that I could break that habit. But that was kind of my last thing. And yeah, I've definitely, I feel too, I don't know if you're noticing this, that even what I'm putting into my body is different. I feel like my body doesn't want as much density. I feel like because we're calibrating to a little more crystalline, that the body's like, yeah, no, I don't need this density anymore. I need things to be lighter. That, at least for me,
Yes.
I'm drinking more of my foods or having stuff that's maybe more pureed and like more smoothies and soups and things like that. It's not that I won't eat solid food, but I'm actually not. My body's way is preferring stuff that's more liquefied way more than not.
Yes.
And
I've had exactly the same. I've been really wanting more and more emptiness and spaciousness. You just said it. It's like the vibrational field is just getting more and more refined, and you said crystalline. That's exactly how I've been experiencing it. So, I've actually moved to 2 meals a day, and I'm doing an 18-hour fast every day. So I stop eating at 6, and then I don't eat my solid meal again until 12. And it doesn't feel like a diet. I'm just naturally being attracted to having more space and being lighter. And
mhm,
it's creating more spaciousness and just stillness in the space. Um, yeah, I really identify with that. I've had the same.
mhm. Well, you mentioned around staying centered, which I agree with as well. And so I'm curious to know what you're doing, or some cool things that you're hearing that can allow us to return to center pretty quickly.
Well, I think really anything that allows you to have much, much more power over the mind is going to be very, very useful right now. Because 100% of what's in our mind is absorbed information. And so if we're going to really create a space for something new, we're going to have to learn how to listen from somewhere else. For me, I kind of live in a constant self-inquiry process where I'm really aware of the thoughts and the conditioning that my mind is telling me, but being able to have some space between what I see and what's actually being thoughted through my mind. So I have general practices that I stick to regularly. I journal, I meditate every day, um, sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes 20, depending on my schedule. Um, I think breath work is a profound practice that is important right now. It doesn't always have to be, conscious connected breath where you're breathing through your mouth in this continuous cycle, but being able to connect with the breath and use the breath. It's something that each one of us has. It's 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 part of what life it has given us. It's our way of exchanging with life every day, every moment. We breathe in life, we breathe out life. And so really getting into a practice of breathing in a conscious way. I can't believe how little I knew how to breathe for so long. I was holding my breath for so long. And when we learn how to breathe, we come back into the present, we connect to the present. And it's such an amazing thing to really master and become intimate with, is with our own breath. So taking time each day, doing deep abdominal breathing, or even doing a breathwork practice, really gets you out of the mind. And then something else for me, which has just become part of my new life, I've emigrated to New Zealand. I live on the edge of the rainforest, and I look out over the ocean. Nature has just become, oh, I don't know how I lived in London for so long. I immerse myself in nature. I go for a walk in the bush in my lunch breaks whenever I can. I will get my feet on the earth as much as I can. I'll go and lie on the earth. I'm just more and more, I'm just so amazed by nature. When I look at, you probably got this already, but I work very much on a species level. So I kind of now often sit in a place where I'm looking at the whole collective, kind of back here looking at the whole collective and what's unfolding. And when I look at where we are as a human race and the madness that we can be in, I just think nature has so much to teach us. It's constantly in some kind of flow and cycle. It has this incredible ability to regenerate itself. When one thing dies, it immediately somehow creates more life, and new life gets formed. And we can learn a lot if we really pay attention and spend time in nature. Especially as we're now in a world where we're on our screens so much. Stepping away and getting your feet on the earth and breathing. These are so simple, but they're so powerful. I looked in the dictionary and I looked under the definition of nature. And it's so interesting. In the dictionary, it says, it speaks of nature as a noun, as a thing. It's a thing. And it even says in the dictionary that it's separate from human beings, which is, of course, how we've all been conditioned, that there's nature, there's that tree, which is a thing, and then we are separate, which is an us, when actually that's a complete illusion. That's a lie. Nature is alive. It's, when you look at a tree, it's not a thing, it's an absolute flow of aliveness. And we are not separate from that. We are part of it. We are actually part of this flow of aliveness. And when we can really remember these things and reconnect to that, then when you look at the madness of what human beings are doing in the 3D aspect of what's happening, when we can really start tapping into that space of aliveness that we're part of, I believe a whole new level of power is going to be able to start coming through from there. Things that we couldn't even imagine. Like when we say we can't even imagine the challenges that might come, I feel the same about the shifts. I don't think we can even believe the power of what could come through. So yeah, getting out in nature, especially those of you who live in a city, like make it a priority. Get your feet on the grass, feel the earth, breathe in the earth, sit with a tree, connect with a tree. The Shipibo in the jungle, when they train to become curanderos, they get sent out into the jungle when they're little children, and they get left there on their own in the jungle as part of their training. And I sat with a shaman who spent 2 years as a 12-year-old boy, 2 years in the jungle on his own. And his father would just come every now and then and leave him leave him water and leave him things. And he knew as much as anybody who has read every single spiritual book on the planet. And I said, well, what books have you read? And he was like, I've read no books. I've learned everything from the plants. The plants taught me everything. And God, when he said that, I was like, wow, it's all around us if we just pay attention. So yeah, simple things. Get in nature, meditate, breathe, journal, stay aware of yourself.
That's really profound because, yeah, there's so much complexity going on and there's so many paradoxes that we're navigating that what you just described there totally makes sense from a very different perspective for me, which is that in the complexity of it all, the more we can seek out the simplicity and the truth in the simplicity, like nature is true, right? And it has a consciousness and it has no ego. If we want to simplify and get clarity, going into nature is going to provide us what we need, and to breathe and to, do the things that are going to allow us to stay fully aware of what's going on and be present to what is, but also be clear enough to potentially see some signs that we may need to pay attention to, because the guides have told me that as well, that depending on where we're living in the world, there's going to be different things we need to prepare for, because each country has its own, I'll say, astrological blueprint, right? It's going to have its own experience, and each region within that country is also going to have its own experience. And so some of us are going to be called to move. Some of us are going to be called to go inside. Some of us are going to be called to expand. Some of us are going to be called to contract. And if we're not awake to what we're being called to do, then that's where we're going to be reacting rather than responding, based on what I'm hearing you share.
Absolutely. I was called to come here. I was absolutely called to come here. I've never lived here. My husband is a Kiwi, but I've been saying no every year that he said he wanted to move. And then last year, it was crystal clear. The calling to come was undeniable. And we sold everything, pulled the kids out of school, and we just came. And now I'm here. I'm realizing that I lived here once in a past life. And actually I was an elder here, and for me it's like, oh, I'm coming back to a land that I needed to reconnect to drop to deeper levels. And it's so clear that I needed to be here to do the rest of my job, to continue my work. So yeah, I really agree. Like when we get those callings, we have to be ready to, that's what I mean by be present, be in your power, because when you get those callings, you've got to be ready to move and go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oof. All right, Nicky, we could talk forever, and we'll obviously do this again because clearly we have nothing to talk about. So you've got the book coming out. So if people want to pre-order, well, depending on when you're all listening to this, you might be listening to it when it's still in pre-order phase, or you might be listening to this when it's already been released. But how do people purchase a copy of the book?
Okay, so the book is called Surrender. Break free of your past, realize your power, and live beyond your story. This is now available for pre-order in the UK or the US if you're listening to this before June the 1st, and you can get it on Amazon. And you can get it anywhere that sells books. This will be available worldwide. The release date will be the 1st of June. And yeah, it's a soulful, beautiful book where I walk you through your own process of maturation. You can also go to my website, which I think the details will be in the notes, but it's www.nickiclinch.com, and there's a whole page for my book on there that you can go onto, and you can order it through there as well. Yeah, I recommend that you get it. I think it will be a very valuable tool to walk each of you through the process of maturation right now. Yeah, we're all being called to surrender. So
nickyclinch.com and Amazon for your book. And what's the social platform that you're spending the majority of your time on?
So you can find me on Instagram at Nicky_Clinch. I share a lot of teachings there. I also have a podcast called Soul Surgery, which is on YouTube as a YouTube channel, and also on iTunes and Spotify. And yeah, those are probably the best ways to stay connected with me, or you can sign up to my mailing list on my website as well, where I offer regular teachings, also meditation packages, activation processes. So, get on my mailing list, come join me on Instagram. Yeah, and we can continue our conversations from there.
Awesome. Well, I'm so grateful that we got to spend this time together. And I'm sure I'm speaking for everyone that they would have had a ton of ahas listening to what you shared today. So thank you for being here. And thanks to all of you for sharing your time with us today. We'll see you again next time.
Thank you. Thank you.